My husband and his mistress, wanting to enjoy their time together, conspired to stage a car accident and fake their deaths for 18 years, and I became their perfect free babysitter, painstakingly raising their twin sons. The day their sons achieved success, they returned, smiling and thanking me for raising such excellent heirs for their family. Let's get a divorce. It's time for the four of us to be reunited. I readily agreed, but as they turned away, I dialed a number I hadn't made in 18 years. Hello, it's time to close the net. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the excited shouts of my sons echoed from the study. Mom! We both got into Corvell. The two of them rushed out, throwing their arms around me in unison. I looked up at my boys, now towering over me by a head, and my heart swelled with pride. You two are incredible. You'll always be Mommy's pride and joy. My husband had been gone for many years. As a single mother, I had raised the boys on my own for 18 long years. And now, seeing them admitted into one of the nation's top universities, I could hardly put my joy into words. Back then, my husband and his mistress, Janie Winston, had died together in a car crash, leaving behind twin boys. Against the protests and scorn of everyone around me, I insisted on raising the illegitimate children of my husband and his mistress as my own. In the blink of an eye, 18 years had passed. The boys had grown tall and strong, and under my relentless care and devotion, they had both secured places at Corvell University. Now, seeing the fruits of all those years of effort, I couldn't be prouder. Mom, we owe it all to you for raising us so tirelessly all these years. Yeah, Mom, without your patient guidance, we'd never have made it this far. The twins had always been filial and considerate. They knew how much I had sacrificed for them, and often promised that once they graduated and found good jobs, they would ensure I lived out my old age in comfort. Their words filled me with warmth. And then I remembered, 2 days from now would be their birthday. In previous years, I had always booked a private dining room at a hotel for their celebrations. But this year I thought, why not combine their birthday party with a banquet to celebrate their admission? It would be lively, joyful, and memorable. I went ahead and reserved a grand hall at the finest restaurant in the city. At the same time, I shared the news of their admission in the family group chat. The moment the message went out, the notifications exploded. 99 plus in an instant. Sammy and Scott really did us proud. If only Jeremy knew how accomplished his two sons have become. He could finally rest in peace. I skimmed through the messages, then sent the banquet location to the group. With everything arranged, I silenced my phone, set it aside, and quietly waited for the day of their birthday banquet to arrive. The birthday banquet was set for 10 o'clock in the morning, 2 days later. That day, I arrived at the restaurant early. I went over the menu and the event program again and again, determined that not a single detail be overlooked. Most of the guests were from the Grant family. None of my own relatives came. Back then, when I defied everyone's objections and insisted on raising the twin sons of my husband, Jeremy Grant, and his mistress, Janie Winston, my parents had been so furious they nearly collapsed from rage. Even after all these years, they still couldn't understand why I had thrown away a good life just to suffer and raise another woman's children. Supported by relatives, my in-laws entered the hall. They went straight to the main seats and sat down. My husband's elder brother and younger sister, along with their families, filled the seats at either side. The main table was set for 8. Surrounded by relatives, my two sons were pressed close on either side, leaving no place at all for me. Allison, what are you standing there for? Serve Mom and Dad some tea. Lillian picked up a handful of chips and shot me a glance. She was my husband's younger sister. Her own marriage had been miserable, abused by her husband and scorned for failing to bear a son. But last year, at 40, she finally managed to give birth to one. Now, with a boy in her arms, her back had straightened, her tone sharpened, and her arrogance swelled. My two sons tried to rise and help me, but their grandparents pressed them back down. My sweet darling grandsons, sit with Grandma, talk with me. Look at these two fine young men, so tall, so handsome. They look just like their father. I'd say they take after Janie more, Jeremy's brother muttered. My in-laws shot him a glare so sharp he shrank back into silence. I circled the main table, pouring tea, refilling wine glasses. Finally, unable to bear it, my sons dragged over an extra chair, forcing a space for me between them. Mom, one of them said, our birthday is also the day you suffered the most. Sit, rest with us. At that, the table fell silent. Faces shifted. Lillian smirked with mockery. If Jeremy knew his sons had been raised so well by you, he'd be overjoyed. My father-in-law cleared his throat, and Lillian instantly shut her mouth. Allison, my mother-in-law said then, eyes narrowing with a smile. Since today's such a good day, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. Please go ahead, I replied. You see, with Sammy and Scott heading off to university soon, that 3-bedroom apartment will be awfully empty with just you living there. Once they leave, why don't Henry and I move in? While you're at work, I can cook for you. So this was her real intention. My parents had paid the down payment for my apartment. Originally, the deed was supposed to carry Jeremy's name, but half a year after our marriage, he had taken Janie out for a drive, and the two of them never returned. I received what was left of him in a small urn. My parents, seeing how hard life was for me, had helped with the mortgage ever since. For that reason, the deed bore only my name. Now with the boys nearly grown, my in-laws, Henry Grant and Wendy Alden, had set their eyes on my home. Mom, it's not that I don't want you to stay, I said evenly, but Sammy and Scott will be going abroad for further studies. I've already sold the apartment to prepare. I plan to buy a 1-bedroom for myself and use the rest of the money to support their education. My father-in-law's face darkened. He slammed the table with his palm. You're our daughter-in-law. How could you make such a big decision without consulting us? Feigning surprise, I answered, but I'm doing all these for Jeremy's children. The money from the sale, hand it to Wendy. She'll keep it safe. I don't trust you with such large sums. You spend too freely. Normally, if I had explained it was for the boys' sake, they might not have pressed further. But today, they seem to treat me as though my role was over now that the children had been admitted to university. I kept my composure. I've already arranged everything with a lawyer. The money is locked into a growth trust. From now on, Sammy and Scott will each receive $1,000 a month every month until they turn 40. At that, Henry's scowl eased, his brows loosening. Now that's better. At least you know enough to leave the money to the boys. Forget about buying another apartment. Just rent something small. No need to waste the money. Just as the family's chatter refused to die down, the restaurant manager walked over and handed me a microphone. Today is both a birthday banquet and a celebration for these two young men's admission to university, he announced. As their mother, perhaps you could say a few words, share some thoughts on raising them. I accepted the microphone. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my sons, Scott and Sammy. Today your sons got into Corvell, but what kind of occasion is this without their real parents here? A voice cut me off mid-sentence. A man and a woman entered, hand in hand. I lifted my head and froze. Even after 18 years, I knew them instantly. One was my long-dead husband, Jeremy, the other, his mistress, Janie. The hall erupted into gasps and whispers, yet my in-laws, seated in the place of honor, didn't even flinch. Not only were they unshaken by their son's resurrection, but they actually pulled Janie to their side and gave her a seat of honor. And Jeremy, the man whose ashes I had buried nearly 2 decades ago, strode right up to me. Allison, you were never much of a wife, but as a mother, I'll give you credit. You did well. At last, Sammy and Scott seemed to grasp what was happening. What's going on? They demanded. Jeremy pointed at Janie. She's your real mother. Allison is just a barren hen who couldn't give me children. If it hadn't been for her refusing to divorce me, threatening me with death, our family would never have been torn apart for 18 years. Before I could speak, the Grant family at the main table chimed in, one after another. That's right. Back then, Allison refused to let Jeremy go. And that's why you were separated from your true parents all these years. Don't be fooled by her raising you well. Her heart has always been twisted. But now, everything's worked out. You boys have grown up, and you've made it into Corvell. At last, you can be reunited with your real parents. My sons stood frozen, confused and dazed, not knowing what to believe. Janie broke into tears, clutching their hands while fumbling with her phone. I am your real mother. Every year I send you gifts. I even watched you secretly after school. Then she turned to me with glistening eyes. Allison, thank you for raising my sons so well. Jeremy slipped his arm around her shoulders, casting me a mocking glance. Now, come with me to finalize the divorce. It's been 18 years. I'm going to marry Janie. She deserves that. Everyone expected me to explode, to weep and rail against them. The Grant relatives leaned forward, eager to watch the drama unfold. Instead, I smiled. Very well. Tomorrow I'll divorce you. Then the 4 of you can finally reunite. Gasps rippled through the hall. Stunned silence followed. No one could believe it. Not the guests, not the Grant family, not even Jeremy and Janie. 18 years of sacrifice, just handed over, like nothing. Even they stared wide-eyed, at a loss. They had expected tears, screams, and desperate pleading. The last thing they imagined was my calm agreement. Jeremy's face twisted in disbelief. Are you out of your damn mind? I met his doubt head on. Are you not happy with my answer? Janie tugged at his sleeve. He caught on immediately, fumbling in his bag and pulling out a contract, rushing as if afraid I'd change my mind. Sign the divorce agreement. From now on, the boys have nothing to do with you. You'll never see them again. I didn't even glance at the pages. I signed my name at the end. Mom, you're abandoning us? My son's eyes brimmed with hurt. They couldn't understand why I signed so quickly and easily. Janie tucked the agreement safely away. Allison, thank you for making this possible. Without you, we could never have lived so freely all these years. Grinning triumphantly, she looked at my 2 tall sons. 18 years, and now they're ours again. You've done your part. You can leave. My father-in-law waved his hand impatiently, dismissing me like a servant. That's enough. Leave. I didn't move. Instead, I drew a slow breath. The moment I had waited for, the truth I had carried for 18 years, had finally come. Since the agreement is signed, I said, it's time you all learned the truth. What do you mean? Janie frowned. Relief washed over me as I exhaled. At last, it was ending. I clapped my hands sharply and turned toward the entrance. Come in. A few seconds later, 2 figures stepped into the hall.